This is Jay Sekulow. Stunning development as Turkey converts an historic church into a mosque.
Live from Washington, D.C., Jay Sekulow Live.
Turkey's current leader, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, has announced it'll be converted back into a mosque, delighting his devout supporters who celebrated outside Hagia Sophia, chanting, "God is great." But the decision horrifies those like Nobel Prize-winning author Orhan Pamuk, who want their country to remain a place where politics and religion are kept separate.
Phone lines are open for your questions right now. Call 1-800-684-3110.
There are millions of secular Turks like me who are crying against this, but their voices are not heard because we don't have enough free speech and democracy in Turkey, unfortunately, anymore.
And now, Chief Counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice, Jay Sekulow.
Hey, everybody, welcome to the broadcast. Let me tell you what's going on. An historic church, and I mean an original in one sense. Church started in 300. The Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, Constantinople area. This is a historic church in the Christian faith. During the Ottoman period, of course, the Ottoman Turks came over under the Muslim regime and converted it to a mosque. Then Ataturk, when he came into power, returned it to a museum, which allowed for the iconography. So you have the picture, the art of the depictions of Christ, the icons, the mosaics. It's a phenomenal facility. Now, Jordan's actually been there. And at the end of last week, on Thursday and Friday, Erdogan, president of Turkey, converted it back from a museum, which was, at least you could see the icons, the mosaics, which tell the entire story of Christ, the entire story of the gospel. And now they're covered. And that covering, I will tell you this, is just the beginning. And this is a World Heritage Site by UNESCO, the UN. And it's been a big site of tourism for Christians from all over the world. Jordan, you've been there.
Yes, and it was actually done by Ataturk, who wanted to make Turkey a more secular state in the Middle East, which was predominantly Muslim, but didn't want it to become like a Muslim dictatorship or a Muslim authoritarian religious totalitarian state. So it became a museum because it had for times been a symbol of conquering and conquest. I think that's key. So the Christians built it. That was their symbol. Then the Muslims took it. They conquered the Christians. You've seen this go back and forth until finally Ataturk comes in and says, we're going to make this a museum for all people. And that's when it became, World Heritage Site. So it doesn't matter if you're a Christian or a Muslim. You will see symbols of both. You will see imagery that looks like a mosque. You will see the mosaics on the wall from literally 500 years after the death of Christ, or about 450 years. And some of these mosaics, Dad, when I was there just about 6 years ago, were just being uncovered. And the size of them, just for people to understand, the size of them, to see that in a predominantly Muslim country, your Christian heritage, how close you are to the time of Christ and those who were being persecuted, dominated, conquered. But even the conquerors knew they covered it up, but they didn't rip it all down, because I think even those conquerors knew the historic significance. Remember, within Islam, Jesus does play a role. So there's a unique blend there. But when you allow a place like this to become a mosque, here's what happens. You used to be able to visit the Dome of the Rock if you weren't a Muslim. You can't now. So over time, it will be exclusionary. This will no longer be a place you can visit or I can visit to see those images of Christ, to remember the early church, or for other people of faith, or just people interested in the history of world religions. It will become, just like the Dome of the Rock, a symbol of conquering Christians and Christianity. We can't let that happen.
We are going to be launching, and we are launching today, an international campaign. And there's already support building by the United States, the United Nations, the European Union, and others. We're going to be joined by the archons. That's the Greek Orthodox laity in a moment. court opinion says from the Turkish Council of State Court, the use of Hagia Sophia is illegal except as provided for in its foundation deed from the year of conquest by Sultan Mehmet, which was created in the year 1470. The property was founded as a mosque under Ottoman law and cannot be transferred for any other use except as the possession of Allah's property. It belongs to the servants of Allah. It is acquired and maintains a spiritual immunity. The decision does admit that the Hagia Sophia was a church, but became a mosque by the right of conquest under the Sultan, and no subsequent act of a foundation can change or annul the fact that it can only be used as a mosque. Joining us on the phone is a very good friend of ours. He is the commander of the Archons, which is the head lady group for the Greek Orthodox Church here in America, Dr. Anthony Limbarakis. Dr. Limbarakis, let me start, and then we've got a whole series of things. Let's talk about the significance of this church, the icons, the mosaics. How significant of a move is this?
Well, it's a tremendously significant. Jay, thanks for having me on. This is something that Erdogan has been talking about for at least a decade. I tell you, when he got into power 17 years ago, we were all hopeful that the persecution of Christians and religious minorities would be diminished. But instead, it's turned the opposite way. And with this move, it's really very, very lamentable that such a provocative move to limit the religious freedom of the religious minorities in Turkey, not just the Christians and the Catholics, the Protestant, the Jews, even the Alevi Muslims do not share religious freedom. So when you exclude the Christians with this from this great symbol of Christianity. It was the greatest church, the largest church in the world for 1,000 years.
I wanted to ask you, Dr. Limbarakis, because we were on that trip together, and that was my first time in Istanbul, and have traveled all over the world, but to visit a place like Hagia Sophia, understanding the significance of both to Christianity and to Islam, but we already were noticing, those of you who had been there before, changes to what was being put up in Hagia Sophia. Now, there are obviously areas that look more like a church, areas that look more like a mosque, but I'm going to pull this picture up for folks, too, in just a minute, because I've got it on my phone, that Erdogan was already, and the religious council there was putting those large, there is no God but Allah symbols up throughout Hagia Sophia in the main dome.
Well, these are very disappointing moves by President Erdogan. The church has magnificent mosaics, among the finest Byzantine mosaics in all the world. And when in 1453, when Mehmet the Conqueror came into the city, conquered the city, all these mosaics were subsequently plastered over. But in essence, they were preserved, fortunately, and painted over. And over the more recent decades, they were restored, and they're absolutely magnificent. These Islamic symbols are something that they have put on subsequent to the establishment of this world, the greatest. In fact, it was called the Great Church of Christ. And that's how we still refer to it, because it was the largest cathedral in all of Christendom until the erection of St. Peter's Basilica in Rome in the 16th century.
I point out to people, this, again, as we're talking to Dr. Limbarakis from the Archons of the Ecumenical Patriarch, this was originally commissioned by Emperor Constantine around 330. You can't get much closer to that secondary time post-Christ than what was happening at Hagia Sophia. And then throughout the history, whether it was in Constantinople, now Istanbul, whether it was, you had, of course, the Orthodox Church, the Roman Church, back to the Orthodox Church, then the Ottoman Turks. This, again, and then finally a museum for all, a place where everyone could go. Those mosaics could be uncovered, and we started to see that on our trip, those mosaics of Christ, which, to even call it that, we don't have anything even similar to that in the United States or and of course historically like that, or in many other parts of the world, because it's been so well preserved and it is so old. I mean, they still don't even understand, architects, how this was built at the time. And so that's why it is such an important historical site for Christians.
And it's a World Heritage Site.
For Muslims, for people of other faiths, and just for the people of the world, if you will, because of the world history is important here. And for me, I feel like, Dr. Limberakis, what I get most nervous about is that what happened at the Dome of the Rock will happen here, and ultimately those of us who do not share that specific Islamic faith of Erdogan will be ultimately excluded from visiting. He may not say that now, but they didn't say that either with the Dome of the Rock. They use one incident, and it gets shut down to Muslims only.
Well, let me just say this, Jordan. You're right on target on all your points, but one additional point that I'd like to make is that the Emperor Constantine, who moved the capital of the Roman Empire from Rome to Byzantium and then named the city Constantinople after himself, also issued the very first religious freedom resolution, the Edict of Milan, which no longer criminalized being a Christian in the Roman Empire. If you were a Christian, you were not persecuted, you were not crucified, you were not beheaded. This act of converting back to a mosque is the opposite of the Edict of Milan. It marginalizes religious minorities. It constricts their religious freedom. Already, the ecumenical patriarch, Bartholomew, who is the spiritual leader of 300 million Orthodox Christians, has tremendous religious restrictions. The church cannot own property. They cannot buy property. They cannot inherit property. The Turkish government interferes in the election of the Pope, of the ecumenical patriarch, which is analogous to the Italian government interfering in the election of the Pope. So, in fact, perhaps the most important religious freedom deficit in Turkey is the fact that they don't even exist in the eyes of the church, in the eyes of the government. The church does not exist as a legal personality in the eyes of the government of Turkey.
They're trying to take this historic church. Let me tell you, it's Hagia Sophia, which means holy wisdom. And this is a church that has mosaics and icons throughout it that have been now temporarily covered with a white sheet. You know what's coming next. You need to be viewing this, everybody, as an attack on Christianity. Whether you're Orthodox or Catholic or Baptist or Pentecostal or whatever other religious group you are, Jewish, whatever it is, this is an attack on faith. It is a World Heritage Site by UNESCO. And Jordan, they are ignoring all of their international obligations here.
Yeah, I'm sending Will, the producer, from my phone, from being inside Hagia Sophia, of this one mosaic that I know we all remember because it's such an important one with Dr. Limberakis, and it was one of the last places we visited in Istanbul. And you see that most of it had been covered up, not torn down, but covered up through plaster. And it was being uncovered very, very well, and you could see how well. I'll show it to you, Dad, so you can see it before you put it on. I mean, it looks like it was brand new almost. I mean, that's because it had been covered by plaster for so long and survived. Now, it was being uncovered. Now, as you said, Dad, it's covered back up. Now, it hasn't been torn down yet. It hasn't been plastered over yet. It hasn't been destroyed yet. But that, to me, Dr. Limberakis, is what's so concerning, is that we were finally starting to get to see those original images, that Byzantine art, those original depictions of Christ just a few hundred years after his death on the cross and his resurrection, and they were just being uncovered, and now they're being covered up again.
Well, it's emblematic of the situation in Turkey. The Turkish government shut down our only seminary nearly 50 years ago and won't allow it to be reopened. We cannot train priests. We cannot train bishops. We cannot train the future leaders of the Orthodox Church because the government has shut down the seminary and won't allow it to be reopened. I mean, it's one religious freedom act against religious freedom after another. And by attacking the Christians by attacking religious minorities. We're concerned about marginalizing all the religious minorities in Turkey: Christians, Jews, Armenians, even Alevi Muslims.
All right. Well, Dr. Limbarakis, thank you for being with us on this segment of the broadcast. We're going to be covering this a lot in the days and weeks ahead. We'll have more from Dr. Limbarakis later this week and next week. We'll be joined by other experts. Skip Ash is going to join us in the next half hour, our international law expert. We're going to talk about some of the impact there. This is a big development.
It absolutely is. And folks, we want you to take action on this. We want you to get educated on this. This is important for all Christians, for all people who believe in religious liberty and religious freedom, and believe the country should be held to a higher standard. And we don't live in this world of conquering based off religion anymore. ACLJ.org. Get activated. Share it with your friends and family. ACLJ.org.
Thanks to your support of the ACLJ, we have had many victories.
The IRS now formally apologizing to Tea Party groups.
The IRS did the right thing by resolving the case with an injunction that mandated a complete change of the IRS nonprofit tax-exempt work as it relates to issue advocacy organization.
If any group feels like they're being targeted, they can go to federal court and bring our case. That's a victory.
It's one of the most significant wins in the ACLJ's history, to take on the IRS and win.
For more than 27 years, the ACLJ has been fighting for freedom and liberty in the United States and around the globe.
These are young people in their 20s and 30s that are doing this. They're fighting for life at a whole new level to beat back the abortion juggernaut. We've got a whole group of young lawyers that are defending them.
Those of us that believe in life know that we're on the right side of history. We understand full well children are children, and they're precious in God's sight, and they're precious in our nation's sight, and they're precious to parents.
But I actually think we're winning. This is one of the social issues we're winning.
The release of Andrew Brunson. He is the American evangelical from North Carolina, held in Turkey for more than 2 years.
They're rushing us to the airport, and there was an Air Force plane that came from Germany that had been on standby. We're flying, and they finally left Turkish airspace. It's like, okay, now we're really out of Turkey and free again.
We're grateful to ACLJ who put it out to these people, they were getting all this out.
All of the people who prayed for us through ACLJ and through your contacts, I'm thankful, I'm grateful, and actually I'm astounded.
We need your help as we continue this work here in the United States and around the world. Join the matching challenge today, and your tax-deductible donation will be doubled.
Welcome back to Jay Sekulow Live. This is Jordan Sekulow. We are taking your phone calls, 1-800-684-3110. That's 1-800-684-3110. I know we'll be playing for it, some of you, during the break. I was on Fox News last night with Steve Hilton on The Next Revolution talking about this idea of school choice, but also what happens if we even, as the progress we're making with school choice, like we did at the Supreme Court, which basically did away with those religious bans some states had on if you had a school choice voucher program, you could not exclude religious schools. And those were laws that went back to 1875 and the time of Ulysses S. Grant. And so finally those have been done away with. But what happens if the schools aren't open? And that's going to be different depending on where you are in the country, where you live, what city or county you're in. And we're all getting a little more nervous right now. So we talked about, well, what could people do that need resources to possibly homeschool, that can they get some kind of rebate, something like that? So we're going to be playing some of that video for you throughout the broadcast today, later on in the show, and we've got it online as well. But I want to let you know we're still on top of that issue with school choice, and we've heard from over 180 people who are concerned they're not going to have the resources available to take care of their kids and educate them because their schools aren't going to be open.
And that's where you were absolutely right yesterday on air when you were on with Steve Hilton on this idea that governments got to release funds that they would have been using for something else to directly help the parents, especially those parents that are in financial need. I mean, it's not complicated. You got to do these are the kind of things that have to be done. Now, we were just talking about an international church incident. We're going to talk about churches under attack. We're going to go to one in the United States, too, and we're going to talk about this a lot more tomorrow because tomorrow is probably when we're following the lawsuit. But this ties into this kind of persecution of churches where it's nowhere near as extreme as what's going on in Turkey, obviously, but this rule in California limiting that churches, even under those limitations of only having 100 people in a worship center that could include, seat 5,000, you can still only have 100 people, but nobody can sing. And when you get the results of what the headlines are in some of these papers, it really points to what's going on here, Jordan.
Yeah, that's right. So this is the New York Times. I'm going to hold it up for people who are watching on Facebook and Periscope. This was July 8th. This was the headline. Churches were eager to reopen. Now they are a major source of coronavirus cases. A major source. That's July 8th, 2020. Well, New York Times had to edit that, and they did, because that headline was wrong. This, again, so how did they have to edit it? Well, churches were eager to reopen. Now they're confronting coronavirus cases. Well, yeah, everybody who's reopening is confronting coronavirus cases. But get this stat, Dad. They were trying to say that they are a major source of coronavirus cases. They said that more than 600 coronavirus cases had been linked to nearly 40 churches. Guess what? That is since the very beginning of this pandemic. That is not a brand new
Let's give that
outbreak.
number again. There's over 3 million cases right now.
Right. And they're saying that churches were eager to reopen and that they are the major source of coronavirus cases. This ran July 8th, so just a few days ago. And then we look at the numbers. More than 650 coronavirus cases have been linked to nearly 40 churches and religious events across the entire U.S. since the beginning of the pandemic. Okay, this is not just in one state. This is not in one city. This is every church in the United States of America. It would account to 0.02% of U.S. cases, and they're going to try and blame churches. Well, even the New York Times, when they looked at their numbers, had to change their headline to they're confronting coronavirus cases. But I'll tell you what, if and the whole country and every church that's been reopening is only dealt with 650 cases since the beginning of the entire...
Over 3 million
right.
in the United States alone.
They're not confronting too much, actually.
Yeah.
So this idea that we can't sing, this idea that we can't get past 25 or 50% capacity because churches are the problem.
In California, it's not even 50%. It's 25% capacity or 100, whichever is less.
And that's a lot of states have that rule. And it's absurd. And it's because of these New York Times articles. And it goes right along, Dad, with trying to ban the singing, mandate, saying you must stop singing, you must stop chanting. Basically, you must stop your worship.
So we look at, in Turkey, we have this unbelievable attack on the historic church, Hagia Sophia, means holy wisdom. That's under attack because the Muslim leadership of Turkey have now decided to cover up the mosaics of Jesus and the references to the gospel. In the United States, because of the pandemic, you can't even sing if you're one of the few people that go to the church building to begin with. I want to go to Than Bennett in Washington, D.C., but first let's take this phone call coming in from Dan, who's in the District of Columbia. Hi, Dan.
Hey, Dan. Welcome to Jay Sekulow Live.
Thanks for taking my phone call. I just wanted to say with the international church incident that Turkey, the position Turkey has taken, seems like to me they're becoming more and more anti-American. Therefore, they shouldn't really be considered so strong of an ally anymore in our eyes with the stance that they're taking on this.
I think I know they're an ally in the technical sense. Than's shaking his head. I can see him on the monitor in the technical sense, but that is all it is.
Jay, we've been writing about this and speaking about this for several years now, that in a technical sense, Turkey is an ally of the United States, but that President Erdogan was taking specific action to remove themselves as an ally. And an ally has to be more than words, Jay. It has to be followed upon with actions. And President Erdogan's actions have taken exactly the opposite approach. Again, we've been writing about this for years, and I think this is the most specific example of President Erdogan specifically leaving the United States behind. And by the way, Jay, I mean, the world is pretty unified in condemning this action that President Erdogan just took, but that was led by the United States. Secretary Pompeo, in advance of the move, warned President Erdogan not to do it, and then following the action, the State Department was very quick in condemning it. So the caller is exactly right. In a technical sense, in a NATO sense, maybe they're an ally, but Jay, the actions demonstrate that they are quickly leaving the United States in terms of being a friend.
We're going to have a way for you to help on the situation in Turkey. Probably by Wednesday, we're going to have up a full campaign as we do on these international incidents. On the case in California, we'll be in federal court, and Jordan could be in federal court there as early as tomorrow or Wednesday.
Yeah, that's right. So we're just putting together the clients, the number of clients, the different religious backgrounds, different churches, different denominations, different faith practices to put this together. Because there's really, Daddy, we can be quite honest about it. There's two ways California can handle this. There's the typical California way of, we mandated it, we're going to fight you out in court because we think we can do whatever we want and shut down whatever we want and we can stop your worship. Or there is the possibility, but you got to file the lawsuit to even get them to respond that way. There is the possibility that they say that use of the word must was wrong. Now,
well, we take that as a win.
It's a huge win because they'd be admitting they were wrong and they didn't mandate. But California, I always expect the worst.
Yeah, that's true because you don't know. The courts are just not hospitable. All right, let me tell you what's coming up. Skip Ash is going to join us. He's a senior counsel with the ACLJ in charge of international legal affairs. He's done an extensive memo on the situation in Turkey with the famous Hagia Sophia Church, which is now being under attack. I mean, just think about this for a moment. Covering up with a cloth mosaics and iconography of Jesus. Mosaics of Christ covered. Mosaic of the gospel story covered. Iconography covered. Later to be, you know what, destroyed. Now, they didn't do that in 1045. But this is a whole different regime. This is the new caliphate attempt. All right, we'll take your calls and comments when we come back at aclj.org. Don't forget, Matching Challenge campaign, aclj.org.
It is a critical time for our nation, and the American Center for Law and Justice is on the front lines, defending life and liberty, engaging the issues that matter most to you and your family. Whether it's working to protect Americans from the dangers of radical Islam and the persecution of Christians, to defending life at the U.S. Supreme Court, to protecting your religious and constitutional freedoms, we could not do this work without you, without your support. And now your support can really make a tremendous difference. For a limited time, you can participate in the ACLJ Matching Challenge. If you make a gift now, it will be doubled. $25 becomes $50. A $100 gift becomes $200. Please stand with the ACLJ right now and call 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255 or go online at aclj.org. Thank you for your support.
Live from Washington, D.C., Jay Sekulow Live. And now, your host, Jordan Sekulow.
Welcome back to Jay Sekulow Live. This is Jordan Sekulow. We are taking your phone calls, second half hour of the broadcast, 1-800-684-3110. I want to give you a little sense of what's going on in Turkey. The Turkish media, and this is a Turkish media outlet that is very pro-Erdogan, so it's kind of a government media outlet. They are reporting now that, this is the quote into English, Turkish media report now that Hagia Sophia is done, Athens, which is in Greece, is next. Turkey also vows to liberate Al-Aqsa after turning Hagia Sophia to mosque. What is Al-Aqsa? The Dome of the Rock. What do they mean by liberate? Take from Israel. Even though Israel allows the territorial control, like I was talking about, of the Dome of the Rock, Al-Aqsa Mosque, under Palestinian control. They actually have a special Saudi Arabians and Islamic Council that controls that area, which is why it's shut down to most tourists from entering who are not Muslim, because Israel has ceded control of that area to allow Muslims to actually be in control of it. So now Turkey's saying, so we're coming for you, Athens, and then we're coming for you, Israel.
Yeah, now, I want everybody to think about this.
And this is in the official government newspaper.
So you have this historic church with this historic mosaic depiction of the gospel. Iconography in the church covered by plaster now, then restored under Ataturk, now being covered again. Wiping out the Christian heritage of one of the great Christian cities. In fact, when people do tours, they often go to Turkey. I mean, I guess they don't care about tourism anymore. I mean, for those watching, you see the pictures of these This beautiful art depictions. I mean, these are incredible. Look at this. They also, the United Nations has World Heritage Convention, which, of course, Turkey signed in 1972. They ratified the convention. Article 1 of the World Heritage Convention states that for the purpose of this convention, the following shall be considered a cultural heritage, and then it lists monuments, architectural works, and obviously Hagia Sophia was listed as a work qualifying for the World Heritage designation. Article 4 of the UN treaty on this says each state party recognizes the duty of ensuring identification, protection, conservation, presentation, and transmission to future generations for the cultural and national heritage referred to in those World Heritage sites. And the Turks are covering it up as they always try to do. This is the reality.
Yeah, I mean, I want to show you the picture. So I took this picture myself. This was recently uncovered. This was back in 2014. I was there with the Archons, and my wife Anna was there on the trip. Dr. Limbarakis, Andy Economou was with us as well. Georgia Economou was with us. If you see this, okay, so this was just being uncovered. You can see how it was covered in plaster. Now, this is very, very large. I'll try to send Will a picture of just like me.
Describe how large it would be.
I'll send Will a picture of like my wife and I pretty far away from it. I mean, this is gigantic, and this is only a part of it. So you've got Christ there. Now, if you, and of course the apostles, and this is just being uncovered, but you see how well it was preserved because the plaster that had covered it, and it had not been destroyed, this building. Yeah. Now, go back to, there's the next picture inside kind of the main area of Hagia Sophia. That is where Erdogan, in the last couple of years before I was there, started putting up the "There is no God but Allah." See, those were not originally part of Hagia Sophia, let's put it that way. Unlike Christ in the Byzantine art that was uncovered, the Muslims did not uncover those giant round symbols. Those are the symbols that say there is no God but Allah. But go to the next photo very quickly, Will. Do you see in between the two "no God but Allah," there's a dome? That is Mary. And that is baby Jesus. Now, I wonder today if in between two "no God but Allahs," if you can still see Mary and baby Jesus. You could then already start seeing where they were walling things off, by the way.
Yep.
That was 2014.
Folks, this is really serious, and this is a violation of international law. Skip Ash is going to be joined with us. You're going to be hearing a lot about this in the weeks ahead. This is a long-term campaign. The Turks are not going to just back down. We're going to have to put unbelievable global pressure on them to not erase heritage sites of the Christian faith, which is what this is about. I mean, I'll talk about it when we come back from the break. Also, support the work of the ACLJ at aclj.org.
As we said earlier tonight, if your school isn't opening, don't accept it. It's your child, it's your money. Why should you pay for a service you're not getting? Reopen schools or give me my school money back. We said you should take it to the courts and fight for your rights and your money. And to explain how that could work, I'm joined now by a member of President Trump's outside legal team and executive director of the American Center for Law and Justice, Jordan Sekulow. A really important part of the ACLJ's work is supporting these legal cases that really drive forward a principle of freedom. And to me, that freedom of parents to choose the best school for their child, especially if the school isn't offering it.
School choice has been an issue that we have keyed in on, and we've argued all the way to the Supreme Court for decades, not just one decade, but decades. And now we're starting to see real results when it comes to school choice. Those amendments that used to be in place that prevented religious schools from receiving voucher money, that was just struck down by the Supreme Court in a case, the Espinoza case out of Montana. That's great news. But you point to the second issue is, it's great to have school choice. It's great to have vouchers if there's school, if there is school. And what we're looking at now is what happens for those underprivileged kids, the same ones we're working with, why we want vouchers. And we believe vouchers are the best option. You know, tax credits, they're great, they're wonderful, but a lot of these folks who are the most underprivileged, they're not even paying taxes, so these tax credits don't cover enough. Sometimes they're $500 or even $1,000. They don't cover the tuition. What we're looking at is voucher programs. But you've keyed on something important to all of us with children. Is school coming back? I will tell you, I get a different email every few days from the school, and I'm not sure, and it makes me nervous. And I'm in a situation, fortunately, where I could figure something out. Most people are not. Welcome back to Jay Sekulow Live. This is Jordan Sekulow. And, I just wanted to read this too. This came from a senior member of the Brotherhood and an unofficial advisor to Turkish President Erdogan, Ali Kardahi. He says that the Hagia Sophia has returned to its true state. So understand what Erdogan is doing here. This is a NATO member. First saying that opening of Hagia Sophia to prayer is a proud moment for all Muslims. That was said by Rafat Murrah, the head of the International Press Office of guess who, Dad? Hamas. So you've got Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood praising this. But there are interesting...
All of this has to be tied in. We're going to tie all of this together in the days ahead, folks. We're just giving you the beginning.
Yeah, because we're talking about something that goes back to 300, AD. So the earliest of the mega churches, if you will, the first mega church.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. So joining us on the phone right now is Senior Counsel for the ACLJ, Skip Ash, who is in charge of our international law group. Skip, this is... let's start first, because you studied this region of the world so extensively and done so much work over there. How significant of a move was this by Erdogan and the court?
This is very significant. It's since Erdogan came to power, his goal has been to desecularize Turkey, to return it to a more fundamentalist Islamic roots in the Sunni tradition of Islam, and to recreate the caliphate, which is during the time of the Ottoman Empire, the caliphate was the central religious authority for all Sunni Muslims, which make up 85% of all Muslims in the world are Sunni Muslims. And the caliphate was the governing body. They were the ones who interpreted the faith, that told them what they had to do to be acceptable to God, this, that, and the other. And he is attempting to do this right now, and the language he's using right now is sending a signal to Muslims around the world. They understand this. He's talking about going from Uzbekistan to Spain, of all places, and he's talking about now the Al-Aqsa Mosque. So he is trying to reestablish what Islam claims, and that is Islam claims that if any territory has ever been under the control of Islam, it must remain the property of Islam. And if it's lost, like Spain was, like Greece was, like Israel has, like Palestine area of Israel has been, then they have an obligation to go and win it back. And this is a symbolic step in that direction.
Let's get to the UN side of this, Jordan, too. You've been there. Describe the size of this first for people.
This is massive. I mean, you see it throughout the entire city. It's been built on a number of times. So, it starting off with the original commission by Emperor Constantine himself in 330. And then the second part was built in the early 5th century because there was original fire. The current structure was commissioned by Emperor Justinian in the 530s, so 530. And then you've got, again, continued to build on. Then the Romans kind of built on, made it look more like a basilica, which is, so it is, the present structure was the largest religious structure in the world when it was built.
There's a great shot of it right there that's on the screen for those watching on TV or Facebook or our social media platforms.
Remained the largest religious structure on earth until St. Peter's Basilica was built in the 16th century. So this remained the largest religious structure in the world from the year 330 to the 1500s. Think about that. And it's still one of the largest in the world. So you've got, again, it served as the cathedral for the Church of the Ecumenical Patriarch. After the 8th century, it became a place to crown new emperors, royal weddings. In the 9th century, I mean, you go through. The Orthodox Church was in control of this from 537 to 1204. The Crusaders and the Roman Church from 1204 to 1261. The Orthodox Church again from 1261 to 1453. And then the Ottoman Turks turned it into a mosque from 1453 to 1934. Remember who lost in the war, in World War II? The Ottoman Turks. So what did Ataturk do as he was rebuilding Turkey? He said, even before the end of World War II, he said, I don't want to be one of these Muslim dictatorships. I want to be a more secular state. Some said he even went too far being secular. So he turned it right into a museum for all people of all faiths or no faiths at all as a symbol of Turkey as a World Heritage Site.
Yeah,
so it would be no longer a place to try and conquer.
People are understanding. I mean, we're getting some reports and some of the comments of the significance of this move in Turkey on this church. I mean, this is an attack on Christendom. It was interesting. Diana writes, "The world's not falling apart; it's falling into place." And she writes, "Even so, come, Lord Jesus." The idea being that Jesus is in control of all of this. The Lord's in control of all this. We know that. Now, there's a legal side of this. We're going to get into that. I want to talk about the legal side in a moment. But Fan, you do our work at the United Nations. There is the World Heritage Site, the UN designations here. These are not insignificant.
Yeah, and Jay, this is the reason that we have accreditation at the United Nations, is to engage issues like this, because, look, the ability of countries of the world, including the United States, to engage is going to ebb and flow over time, but we can be there. I was disheartened, Jay, to see the wording of the reaction from UNESCO, which is the arm of the United Nations involved in this. There's been pretty universal, pretty worldwide condemnation of this move, but this is what the statement said. This is far too weak and far too slow, in my opinion, Jay. It says, UNESCO calls on the Turkish authorities to open a dialogue without delay in order to avoid a step back from the universal value of this exceptional heritage, whose preservation will be reviewed by the World Heritage Committee, get this, Jay, in its next session. Jay, that's too late. This conversion is happening right now. So look, one of the things that we'll do as we go to the United Nations is press upon them the urgency of this matter. Are those words correct? Yes, they are. But Jay, their proposed action step will be too late. This conversion will be complete by the time the World Heritage Committee sits for its next session.
All right, so Skip, what are the legal ramifications here of this?
Well, the issue is that, as you have already pointed out, Turkey is a member of these treaties, and the Hagia Sophia became a World Heritage Site as a museum. It did not become a World Heritage Site as a mosque or as a church, but as a museum. And because of that, the Turks are allowed to ask for funding to help maintain this, and they have received over $200,000 over the years to maintain this edifice, and the primary purpose is to uncover and to reclaim the mosaics. So they have been asking for money to reclaim the mosaics, which is the Christian portion of the church that had been plastered over, and now, if it's converted back to a mosque, what's interesting is that under Islam, you can't have pictures of people and animals and so forth in any way, because they view them as idols, and therefore they're either going to have to cover them up. They're going to cover them up in some way, which is probably plaster them over again. So they've been disingenuous, first of all, with receiving this money for a purpose that they didn't intend to follow. The other thing is that because this treaty came into being and was accepted by Turkey before this Erdogan and his regime came to power, trying to undo a lot of this stuff, they're still bound by it unless they want to abrogate the treaty or to withdraw from it, which they haven't done. So the issue is that work has been done by the international community. This is a World Heritage Site. The international community, the world, has contributed to making it what it is and to revealing those beautiful mosaics. And now, again, this is an open and notorious move of Islamic triumphalism on the part of this regime, trying to return this to a mosque, and then we'll have to cover up all the Christian markings in that church in order for it to be a functioning mosque. With respect to what measures can be taken, as in most treaties, there are no teeth in the treaty, so it's going to have to be done by international pressure on the part of states and the United Nations, the international community, the European Union. All these places need to bring a great deal of pressure on the Turkish government in order to tell them that they have to abide by their international obligations, and that includes what they've agreed to with respect to this edifice.
We have an extensive paper on this that Skip Ash and his team have put together. It's about 5 or 6 pages. Let's get this up as a resource at the ACLJ website at aclj.org, and maybe I can maybe I'll tweet some of this out later, also with links to it for people to have. This is an issue that's not going away. This is an attack on Christendom, and no matter what denomination you are or what faith you are, understand the significant impact this is on religious liberty. Quickly to Fan, Skip mentioned international pressure. That is what's going to have to win this.
No question about it, Jay. And multiple countries, including the European Union, are already saying the right thing. The United States is leading the way. But as always on these things, Jay, words are empty unless they're backed up by action. So that's one of the roles that we can play, is unifying those world players that are saying the correct thing and unifying them behind actual action steps to prevent this from happening. So I think that's the next step ahead, Jay.
Folks, we need you to really get educated on this because, again, someone wrote in, Scott on Facebook, converting Christian symbols to mosque is a gesture of conquer. Understand what Skip said. For it to become a mosque, you're not going to see Mary. You're not going to see baby Jesus. You're not going to see the depiction of Jesus Christ. They don't allow that. That's why it was covered up before. And this time, are they going to cover it up or are they just going to sandblast it down? Go to aclj.org. All right, welcome back to Jay Sekulow Live. This is Jordan Sekulow. We are taking your phone calls, 1-800-684-3110. We're going to get back to Hagia Sophia. We do have a call about California as well. I want to take that because we're preparing to file that case very soon, tomorrow or the next day, and then we're just putting the clients together. This is the mandate that you cannot sing, you cannot chant. This takes out basically all kinds of religious worship, regardless of your denomination, regardless of your faith. Kim is calling in from Michigan on line 1. Kim, welcome to Jay Sekulow Live.
Hi, thank you.
Hey, Kim, you're on the air.
Great. Do you want me to ask my question now?
Yes.
Okay. So here is what I have been wondering, and more particularly on the limits of numbers allowed in the churches and how small it is for the larger churches. Is that, in context of everything else we're seeing, an attempt to limit proselytizing and witnessing and more extensively to bound the number of the Christian membership and start to shrink that?
Let me tell you what it is. They are passing a one-size-fits-all regulation that says you can have a church of any size. You cannot have more than 25% capacity. Let's say that's okay in light of the COVID epidemic. People would say, I understand that. But then they have another thing, or 100 people, whichever is left. So if you had a church facility that sat 200, you wouldn't have the problem. You could seat 25%, 45 people. Here's the problem: if you have a church that's 2,000 seats, and you could then have a situation where you could have 300 people, you still can only have 100. And what if you had a sanctuary that sat 5,000? It still would be 100. And then you can't sing even if you wear a mask. But you could protest on the streets, and that's protected speech with or without a mask. They prefer you wear a mask, and it is. I'm not saying it's not protected. I think it is protected speech. But this is the problem when these regulations get put in place like this.
That's right. And then that is why you must fight them. And especially fight them when they go so far as to say, well, it's 100 people or 25%, whatever's less. It doesn't matter if you have a mega church or not. It's got to be whatever's less. And then, by the way, even if you are going to attend with those small numbers, you must cease singing. You must cease chanting. That is not a recommendation when I read that. You don't use the word must in a recommendation. You don't say should. It didn't say should or we recommend or we hope you would or we believe you should. This was must, and that's why we're going to court.
No question about it. Let me go back. We still have Skip, right? Yeah. I want to go back to the Hagia Sophia for a moment here. Skip, you talked about international pressure. We know what the law is, so there's clearly a violation of the UN treaty that they signed. We know that there's already international condemnation coming. We also know in doing this that, and I'll go to Than and Skip on this. Skip first. These take time. You've got to, and you don't have a lot of time here, so you've got to move expeditiously to build this kind of global support.
That's exactly right. They're going to be starting worship in this cathedral on the 24th of this month, as I recall, and so Muslim worship. And that means that all these things at least have to be covered up in some form. They may do it with sheets or something else, but those who are faithful Muslims are going to be upset with that because that means those symbols are in an active, a functioning mosque, and if that's true, then they shouldn't be there because it violates their faith. So the problem we have here is they're going to probably be moving pretty quickly too. So that we need to get this thing moving quickly so that they realize that they've created a tsunami that's going to be coming at them, that they need to reconsider this very quickly before they've done damage that cannot be repaired.
It is a blatant, forthright, and direct attack on Christianity. Make no mistake.
And religious liberty as a whole, and also on the world, because this is a World Heritage Site. So we've had spoken out. We've had Secretary of State Pompeo, His All Holiness the Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew of the Orthodox Church, the United Nations. Okay, these are not always the same groups that speak out together in the same condemnation. Mike Pompeo and the State Department, Pope Francis, Joe Biden, the country of Greece. But it goes further than that. I'm actually going to be talking to our team in Moscow, because the Russian Orthodox Church, which has not always gotten along great with the Greek Orthodox Church, has also condemned this. So has the Russian Federation, the European Union, Cyprus, and others in Turkey as well, and especially Armenian members of Turkey's parliament.
So, Than, how does that play then when you go with our team to the United Nations?
Well, it shows that the world is in agreement, Jay, and I would read one of those statements that Jordan gave. The ruling by the Turkish Council of State to overturn one of modern Turkey's landmark decision and President Erdogan's decision to place the monument under the Management of Religious Affairs Presidency is regrettable. So again, they said the right thing, Jay, but when we go to the United Nations to advocate on this, I'll be keying in on that last word of the European Union statement, regrettable. Okay, you're right, it is regrettable, but what are you going to do about it? Are you going to band together as a world group under the lead of Secretary Pompeo, who's already issued this statement, and actually try to do something about it? Jay, you know this better than I do. The United Nations at times can be very good about speaking and very slow to act. I think Skip got this exactly correct. You might have a moment of time here because it might take a little bit of time to effectuate these actions, Jay, but we don't have time to move at the typical pace of the United Nations. The European Union and the others are going to have to decide that they're going to back up their words with action.
Skip, you said something very important. I want you to reiterate it again. They're about to have Islamic worship there starting in just a couple of weeks. I'd really like about 12 days. And once that starts, it's going to be very hard to contain this.
That's exactly right. The reason is that the people who are going to flock to that to worship are the people who are the most committed Muslims who have never liked the idea that this should have been a museum. So you're going to have people in there who are more motivated than most Turks about this, and they're the ones who are going to bring pressure on the government, plus they probably are supporters of the government. So it's going to be very difficult for the government to step back now that it's done this without a great deal of immediate pressure from the international community.
Well, that's why I want to talk to everybody that's listening to this broadcast. There are millions of you that are watching or listening on this broadcast each and every day. And this is an attack on all of us of faith. This, of course, is an attack on Hagia Sophia, Holy Wisdom, the church. It's also an attack on Christianity. And I want you to think about this for a moment. This is a historic World Heritage Site that the government of Turkey has now come in, and the first phase of what they're doing is covering up mosaics of Jesus and the disciples and Mary and Christian symbolism, including the cross. That's what they're doing. The question is, what are we going to do? And what we have to do is have international pressure at an incredible level to once again put Turkey on notice that the world will not tolerate the eradication of a religious faith, here Christianity, at the whim of a hostile government. The world will not tolerate the destruction of a Christian church based on a decree that is not enforceable in international law. And that's why we've mobilized our resources at the ACLJ and the ECLJ and the SCLJ to fight back. We'll talk to you tomorrow.